Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to see if anyone else rolls in. Hi all, thanks for joining us today. First of all, I bet that first screen that you were looking at was pretty irritating. Isn't it much more pleasant being presenting with a screen where you're able to actually read the text without difficulty? Colour contrast is a really great start for accessibility, but let's keep in mind that colour shouldn't be the only visual means of conveying information. Some people detect colour in completely different ways, and some people don't detect colour at all. Hi, I'm Stacey. I'm a Senior Account Manager at Elixirr Digital. I have a huge passion for inclusivity, which makes me one of the key speakers today. I'm a millennial and I really enjoy watching TV with the subtitles on.
I'm James. I'm a SEO specialist at Elixirr Digital, and there's a lot of overlap between SEO and accessibility best practices. So I'll be talking you through some of the common issues that we come across and kind of how they can be fixed.
So today we're going to go through a few parts of the European Accessibility Act, specifically what it is, why it's important to digital accessibility, what those accessibility standards actually are, and how we can ensure we're compliant. And then we're going to look at how our marketing team specifically can help us on our journey of becoming more accessible. And of course, we'll end with some what we deem to be really great examples, and there will be time for Q&A at the end. So jumping straight into it, what is the European Accessibility Act? So otherwise known as the EAA, in simple terms, it is a landmark EU law which requires everyday products and services to be accessible for people with disabilities. It's not exactly changing per se, but rather it's going to complement the existing EU sectorial legislation on accessibility. So there's a few things that it aims to do. The first one is to improve the functioning of the internal market for accessible products and services, and it will also enhance the accessibility of information, communication, and digital content for people with disabilities. One of the reasons this act is so important, and it's just a really great thing to be doing, is it will make life easier for at least 87 million people. So quite a outstanding number there. So looking at the key dates and timelines for the implementation. So the end date, the 2025 date, is the one that we really want to be keeping our eye on. This is our landmark, what we should be achieving accessibility compliance. So as of June 28th, 2025, companies must ensure that products and services are covered by the Act are accessible. And how exactly did we get to the Accessibility Act? Well, it was first adopted by the European Parliament in 2019, and then EU member states had until June 2022 to transpose the Act into a national law. So as you can see, it has been around for quite some time, but 2025, on June the 28th, is the date that we are really aiming for and is our crucial endpoint. So everyone that's on this webinar today is here because I'm assuming they feel like their sector is being impacted by the Act. And well, let's be realistic, every sector is impacted by accessibility. We should all be ensuring that our products and services are accessible and that we are being as inclusive as possible. But the sectors that are impacted by the Act and listed below are public sector bodies, including government websites and apps, e-commerce websites, banking services, transportation services such as ticketing and information systems, and media services including TV and online streaming. Now, given their increasing importance for communication and participation in the economy, I think it's clear that that is why digital technologies are the focus of the European Accessibility Act for 2025. So what is the importance of digital accessibility?
So as we covered sort of very early on, there's 87 million Europeans living with disabilities, and that's almost 1 in 5. In the UK, it's closer to 1 in 4 people, with 23% of working age adults registered as having a disability of some kind. So the benefits of accessibility is very widespread, but it also works in general for everyone. So there are some accessibility features that have been developed, such as subtitles for television, that are used by sort of everyone across the board. So what you end up with is enhanced user experience for everyone. You get yourself a little bit of legal protection. So the EAA is likely to come with fines, which we'll cover a little bit in a second, but also expanded market research. You'll have access to a larger audience, which will include people with disabilities and ageing populations across Europe. So this being quite a widespread act, there will be some legal implications of non-compliance. It's not exactly entirely clear at the moment what those will be, because they're going to be set on a per country basis. But the estimates are up to 20,000 euros per infraction in some countries, but we'll kind of share more information once we've got it on that front. In the US, there's been a lot of like lawsuits from individuals and advocacy groups, so we can expect we might see that kind of thing coming through in the future. But there's also reputational damage that can affect consumer trust and brand loyalty, and we'll go a little bit more into some of the data behind that in a moment. So, as we mentioned, the Act covers a few different areas, but everyone on this call will be involved with a website of some kind. So that's primarily what we want to focus on. It will be mobile applications as well. E-commerce websites is the main focus, but because of the SEO crossover with accessibility, there is obviously a sort of a general digital benefit to be had from embracing accessibility. Some of you might be involved in banking services, so you should know that it also extends to online banking, ATMs and payment terminals. And then there's also transport services, which we know some of our clients are involved with. So you have to also think about ticketing machines, obviously your website and your apps. You have to provide accessible information on those. So that's all the kind of the legal and kind of social reasons to do it, but the business case is also pretty substantial. So a 2016 piece of research showed that 70% of customers with disabilities said they will click away from a website that they find difficult to use. 83% of participants with access needs limited their shopping to sites they knew were accessible. 86% have chosen to pay more for a product from an accessible website rather than buy the same product for less from a website that was harder to use. And 4 million people abandoned a retail website because of barriers like that. And it all adds up to an estimated 11.75 billion from the click away pounds. So people that very much intended to kind of interact and purchase from your business who because of accessibility reasons, haven't. So we vaguely mentioned that there will be some kind of standards to hit from the WCAG standards. So we'll briefly go into what those are. So we'll keep it kind of fairly top level. So they were developed by W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and it's basically based on 4 principles. So perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So perceivable, the information has to be presented in ways that users can perceive and see. So color contrast is a really good example of that, being able to read text on a page. Operable, interface elements must be operable by all users. So there will be some users with mobility issues may not be able to use a mouse, so we'll be using keyboard to access your website, and so your website has to be operable in that scenario. Understandable, so information and operation of the user interface must be understandable, and that goes down to the language that you use as well. So the average reading age of people in the UK is 9 years old, so you very quickly start to get an understanding of how easy it is to make your content not particularly understandable for everyone. And then robust. So content must be robust enough to be interpreted by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. So that includes things like screen readers, which people with limited visibility might use. This WCAG is the standard kind of used to measure levels of compliance. And for those of you who are familiar with it, we'll be needing to aim for a AA level of compliance. That deals with the biggest and most common barriers for users, which we'll sort of go into in a second. There is a level above that, AAA, but that tends to apply more to software. There might be some cases for a few client websites, but you can kind of look at those on a case-by-case basis. I think most sites will just need to hit AA. So when we start to look at some of the steps to ensure compliance, one of the first things that you need to do is work out whether your website is accessible, full stop. So there are ways you can do it. So there are automated tools like Wave, Axe, and Lighthouse that you can use to manually identify accessibility issues on a page-by-page basis. One of the best approaches might be to actually conduct manual testing by involving users with disabilities to get first-hand feedback. In developing this webinar, we tried a few assistive technologies and it was frustrating. So even in our kind of few hours of testing, really hard to get like a full view of what websites we do. So definitely involve people with disabilities in your process. So I'm going to take you through a few of the common accessibility issues that we see across websites and where the most likely improvements are going to be. Hopefully these will all be things you'll be fairly familiar with already. So a study by WebAIM, which is Accessibility in Mind, showed that 97.4% of homepages have detectable accessibility issues. The most common failures were 86% of those homepages had low color contrast issues, 61% had missing alt text for images, 51% had empty links, 54% had missing form input labels, and 27% have empty buttons. So you can see this is a massive, widespread issue. It's fairly safe to say that there's very kind of few websites actually doing this right based on that data. But it should also be very easy to fix. So we'll go through some of the common issues over the next few slides, just to give you an idea of what they are and how they affect accessibility. So missing alt text on images. Anyone who's ever been involved with SEO or worked with an SEO specialist will know that alt text on images is a really good opportunity to include keywords in images. It's kind of one of the staples of SEO. But it also gives a lot of contextual information for people using screen readers. So someone using a screen reader will need an audio description of what the image is to get the full experience of your website. Without that text, visually impaired users will miss out on important information. So by applying alt text to your images, you improve user experience for visually impaired users, but you also get a little boost in kind of SEO because you've provided additional context for search engines. So that's a win-win on both fronts. Color contrast, which you'll all remember from the very first opening slide of this presentation. So if you've got insufficient contrast between text and background, it makes it really difficult to distinguish text from background. And it was hard enough for kind of people without visual impairments. You can agree from the beginning of this webinar, it makes it really, really difficult if you've got visual impairment or you're colorblind or something like that. So it's definitely something that needs to be considered properly. So addressing any issues with color contrast helps to enhance readability and reduces eye strain, but also makes everything easier to understand and use for all users right across the board. So again, that's a huge win. Inaccessible forms, so this is around keyboard navigation and sort of labeling. So I mentioned that there might be some users who can't use a mouse. If your form isn't set up for keyboard navigation, or if it's not very easy to use with keyboard navigation, you're kind of cutting off a whole chunk of people who won't be able to interact with your forms properly and therefore won't be able to convert on your site. It's kind of as simple as that. So you'd see kind of a decrease in conversion rates and user experience. So obviously the inverse of that is if you can get these forms running properly, you'll see better user experience. Everyone will be able to submit forms and you should see better conversion rates from all your users. But again, this is one of those accessibility features that affects everyone. And if every single form on your site is navigable and operable in as many different ways as possible, everyone wins. So it's yeah, what's good for one is good for all. And then I briefly mentioned keyboard accessibility as part of the forms, but in general, keyboard accessibility is a really important aspect of accessibility, full stop. So being able to navigate through a website using the keyboard alone is really important. As I said, there might be users with mobility issues who can't use a mouse, for instance. So this would include having to go through sort of your navigation manually with a keyboard. So if users aren't able to do that, or if your navigation doesn't open properly when interacted with the keyboard, that immediately cuts off like quite a huge amount of the experience. And you can start to see why people with disabilities and sort of temporary impairments might abandon your website. So fixing that would allow all users to navigate the site efficiently. Again, that's everyone. There are, hundreds of people who just use keyboard as a point of preference. And it also ensures that every single interactive element on your site is accessible. So we're going to pass over to what the role of marketing is in accessibility.
Yeah, so as James has just gone through a list of things that we can be doing or things that could be fixed quite easily. And a lot of you on the call will have teams, marketing teams, and it's about how we can use individual sectors of our marketing team and certain specialists to really make an impact, and how we continue to do that through the longevity rather than just a one-time fix. So as James rightly mentioned, the average reading age in the UK is just 9 years old. So when we really start to think about that, we start to think, actually, we should be making our content accessible, and we should be writing in a really simple language and a clear structure. I think it's so easy for us to be in our businesses and be in our industries and understand all the acronyms and kind of all the words that make us be us, basically, where what we should be doing is really writing in layman's terms and using simple language and a clear structure. And that also goes with using inclusive language as well that considers all users. Another thing James mentioned was creating alt text for images to describe visual content. So as James rightly said, it's for impaired users who are unable to see the images on our pages. It allows the user to have a better journey and a better experience on our pages by being able to see exactly what's going on. So I've got an example on the right-hand side of Snoop. Some of you may have already seen this on our LinkedIn. But on the right-hand side, you can see the left-hand side, you can see that Snoop is looking smooth with his shades on. At this point, we don't know anything. We don't know if Snoop is a Snoop Dogg the rapper. We don't know if he's a person, an object, or a lampshade on his head. There's really so much and so many avenues the imagination could go down. The one underneath that insert description here is even worse, quite lazy. It means we've made no effort at all to put in an alt tag. And then an example on the right of a dash hound in a mustard coloured jumper and matching glasses on a plain mustard background is absolutely perfect. It tells us exactly what the image is. And if you closed your eyes while I read that sentence out to you, I think you'd have a really good idea of what that image was trying to show you. So from a content creation point of view, we need to make sure that our team are constantly keeping up to standards by ensuring our content is accessible. And we need to continually do this. This isn't just a 28th of June 2025 and then you no longer do it. It should be something that we're always aiming to achieve. Moving on to the role of an SEO marketing specialist. So there's a few things. Oops, sorry, just skipped one too far. There's a few things here on SEO, and I have got a little video which I don't unfortunately think you're going to hear the sound, but I'd like to play it to you anyway, just so you can see kind of the journey of a screen reader for the British Airways. So as James mentioned, we've done some testing ourselves on screen readers, and you really only have to enable screen reading on your iPhone once to feel really irritated and that actually we're not being inclusive enough. So I'll talk you through it here. What you'll see is on each part of the website that you click on, it will read out the blurb for you. But what you're seeing is on this one, where it goes to .air, the screen reader can't pick that up and the sentence just stops. So you get comfort of your seat with, the sentence just stops, and then you have to click on every individual word, .air, hour, Wi-Fi, service, which is really not ideal. Another really great example here is an image of a lady sitting on her laptop in the executive suite. There's one thing to note on that alt tag that I picked up, and it doesn't at all mention that she's on an aeroplane, which I think is just where they're lacking a little bit. So how can accessibility help our SEO efforts? Well, first of all, search engines favour websites that are accessible because they provide a better user experience. So again, although we should always aim to be inclusive, this is actually helping our businesses as well. If we're accessible and we're providing better user experiences, then it often means that we're going to perform better and we're more likely to rank in Google and the SERPs. So there's obviously the main reason of being accessible, but there is also an extra business case there that we're going to perform better from an SEO perspective as well. And then last but not least, touching on to the social media side. So again, I've got a few examples here, and one is from an Instagram post and the other is actually from an Instagram handle. So the first thing to mention is when I first joined the call, I told you that I was a millennial and that I really enjoyed watching TV with the subtitles on. Now, actually, this is a huge thing at the moment that we see across social media, and 85% of Facebook videos are now watched without sound. And you can tell that it's the exact same for TikTok. When you log on to TikTok in your working day, potentially, and you're scrolling through with no sound on, you're relying on the content creators and the influencers to ensure that they've enabled captions so you're not missing any of the content while you're listening with no sound on. Now, of course, I'm talking from a perspective of having no impairments. So imagine if you did have a hearing impairment and you were logging onto these apps and you weren't able to take in the content because we're not providing the captions. So also always ensure videos have captions and transcripts. Another thing that you could do that would really help your users is describing images in posts to ensure all users can understand the content. So on my right hand side, there's a post that I've put on of Winston, my dog, and I've used some emojis, and you see this so many times in businesses posts with like a clap emoji and join, clap emoji, hour, clap emoji, team. And now the screen readers actually read that out. So what you'll notice is that you're getting a really jumbled sentence and the user that's using the screen reader just cannot understand it. So that's a really bad example of how we should do an Instagram post. I'm not going to touch on this Instagram user too much, but Volkswagen Italy, this is their actual handle. You can go on Instagram and look for yourself, but I think it's just a little funny example of how sometimes when we're using hashtags or we're using words that are put together, that we have to be careful, but they do make sense. So always use accessible hashtags and consider readability. So James is just now going to take us through some examples.
Yeah, so a couple of examples of businesses, big businesses that are really kind of leading with accessibility. Amazon is absolutely smashing accessibility. Pretty much everyone on this webinar will have been on Amazon at some time. It's very easy to use. All of the information is understandable. You can see they've got pretty much like text all on a white background. Call to action buttons are a certain color, and the text on those buttons is black, so it easily stands out. So they've streamlined navigation, they've improved readability and contrast levels. They also offer adjustable font size and text to speech. They also do have a slight advantage because obviously they've got Alexa, so you can order things from Amazon using speech commands. So you don't even need to go to their website. They also have hardware aids, so they've got like the Amazon Dash buttons. So if you want to order one product over and over and over again, you just have to press that button in your house and it will arrive. So they've really kind of pushed forward to make sure that absolutely everyone, regardless of disability or temporary impairment, can order from their website. And I mean, they're the biggest online retailer going, so it's kind of obvious that that what they're doing is working, and has really worked for them. And then there's another example. Moving into the banking sector of Bank of America. So as well as developing a fully compliant website, which makes sure everyone can access it, you can see from the screenshot, really easy to understand. All of the text stands out. But even if you are colorblind, for instance, they have adjustable alternatives, so you could change the colors of the website to suit your visual impairment. They have adjustable text size. You can change the contrast levels, as I just said. And it works with keyboard or mouse inputs. I think the big one for the Bank of America, and probably something that we don't need to think about, particularly for the European Accessibility Act, but it does show that like how far you can push this, is that they also offer remote sign language interpreters that customers can connect with virtually anywhere on demand. So between Amazon and Bank of America, two massive brands, they've really kind of sort of got ahead of the game and embraced accessibility, knowing that it will kind of improve their business and help them sort of serve more customers, which is kind of half of what this is all about. The other half is obviously making life easier for people with disabilities and temporary impairments.
So I hope you found this webinar useful, and those examples, I think they're absolutely brilliant. Like James said, they're really paving the way. But the main things that we've covered today are the Accessibility Act, including the timelines for making changes to avoid fines. As we said, anyone that has joined this webinar today, we will provide more information as and when we find out on kind of more information around the fines, but we know that deadline that we should be aiming for in 2025. We've explored how the marketing specialists in your own team can help you achieve accessibility. And we've also spoke about some free audits that you can do yourself in-house. James did mention that these audits tend to be page by page and cannot do the whole thing. But of course, we at Elixirr Digital do have tools that can do your whole website, and we could audit those and give you a rating back on what you do need to do to make sure that you are compliant for 2025. I think one thing that we've made quite clear through this webinar is even with the changes that we all need to make to meet the requirements of the EAA, it's a continuous journey. It's not a one-stop shop and done. It will require people just thinking in this way moving forward, and ensuring that when we're writing new content, we're putting new social media out there, we're adding new products and services to our website, that we ensure that the standards are maintained way beyond the 2025 deadline. Finally, I hope what we've made really clear is that though at the forefront of our mind is inclusivity for those and being able to access all websites and all products digitally, really there is a huge business case for you. You know, there's 87 million people out there that are really struggling to use digital products and services. So if people are not going onto your websites because it's too hard to navigate and they're defaulting back to a website that they know, you're missing out on business. So hopefully what we've kind of shown is two sides to the story. It's the main reason that everywhere should be accessible for everyone, but also the business cases of how this would positively impact you as well. So just want to say thank you again for joining. And if you do have any questions, we do have a little bit of time left to get through some of those.
So got one question here. It's a big one. Sort of could have predicted this one. Is when will we know more information about the fines? I think as Stacey said, to be honest, we won't really know until we know. It is all being worked out on a country by country basis. So and obviously the fines will then depend on which European countries you trade with. So it's all very complicated. But as we say, as soon as we've got more information on it, we will share it. So keep an eye on our website. We'll obviously send out emails to everyone that we can, just to make sure that's all covered. But yeah, that's the kind of that is the big question on this topic at the moment. We've got one here. Does an accessibility toolbar cover all of this? It's a really good question. So one of the audit tools that we've used includes an accessibility toolbar. It will cover some of it. So that will cover things like changing text size, being able to usually change the color scheme, kind of things like that can be kind of manipulated on a website without having to kind of change the code at source, if that makes sense. But there will be certain elements that just come from things like branding that may need to be kind of changed in like hard code, if you see what I mean. So it might need to be changed in the website full stop. So for some people, an accessibility toolbar might be enough because your site might already be really set up. For other people, it will be kind of a small chunk of the issue, and we would say that an audit is always the best place to start to kind of understand where the specific issues that you see might be. There's a long question here that I'm just trying to digest. Can we recommend a good accessibility tool? Yeah, so I would tend to, if you're looking for just a day-to-day, everyday tool, I would tend to recommend the ones we mentioned, so Wave and Lighthouse. They are slightly automated. You obviously do get results kind of in browser. Yeah, they're not the fastest. We are using a tool for our audits, but it's quite big. It's might not be suitable for like the sort of individual businesses, just because of how colossal it is. I'm sure you can all guess what I mean by that. But yeah, if we do hear of any tools, because that's the other part of this, is that because this act is coming every week, there's a new tool, because everyone's trying to kind of get ready for it and push their services. So if there are any more tools that come out that we think are worth looking at, or we can recommend to our clients or prospects, we will let you know as soon as we know, essentially.
Great, thanks, James. And then I think I have one last question, which I'll do the honours of answering, and it's, can you share this deck with us? And we will ensure that we email out this deck to all attendees. And what I will also do is attach the examples of the screen readers from the iPhone on there for you, so you can listen to that yourself. I think that is all the questions. I will check after to see if there's any that we've missed and get back to you if we have. Otherwise, if you do have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to myself or James. And thank you once again for your time and for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.